On Thursday, Standard and Poor's downgraded America's credit and debt rating to less than AAA. By Monday, $2 trillion worth of stocks value had been wiped off the stock exchange. And to stabilise the markets, the ECB started buying up Italian bonds and Spanish bonds in a way to stabilise the situation, to get the markets more satisfied with what was going on. But yet, the word of one man, Alan Greenspan, saying that the US is decisions in the future have only hard choices, made the entire instability of the markets go back again because of the different statements of politicians and the lack of support for Angela Merkel's initiatives by German politicians as well. So it's not just Alan Greenspan and the Americans who are doing this, has rattled the markets yet again. There may be some strategy of tension between the Federal Reserve and the ECB, in that the Federal Reserve has gone on a policy of trying to knock out Europe as a major competitor throughout this crisis since Lehman Brothers to the present day. Now, although they are separate crises, one was a financial crisis, this is a crisis about the debt credibility of countries such as the United States being able to repay their debts. It could just be another bubble, as Friedman said. George Friedman said from Stratfor Intelligence. Check that channel out. But I do not believe it is. As a European, I do not want to see America fall. I want to see America as an equal partner. But let's be realistic. We are living in an American empire, an American hegemony. America has thousands of troops in Europe. I don't want those troops to go, but we might have to question whether America can pay those troops, if it can pay its army in Afghanistan. And this question has been noted by the troops, and they're looking at the financial situation and asked Admiral Mike Mullen, the Chief of the Defence Staff in the United States, whether they're going to get paid while they're going operations. And then we've got to look at the rise of China. With America controlling all the sea lanes in the world, there still is the problem of whether it can get extra funds in times of emergency. Let's say the Chinese invaded Taiwan. That would mean that America would have a Third World War situation on its hands. Of conventional and military crisis situation, because China is linked into Russia and Kazakhstan and Pakistan through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Russia is being wooed by the Europeans, and all the three different powers are trying to develop an alliance system based on the American alliance system. Now, obviously, Europe is part of the American alliance system, but the problem is, if China was to have inflationary problems, which it is having, and it's decided that to supply its population with food, it needed to raise its currency up to bring in food from other places in Africa and Europe, then there would be a scramble for resources, and China might go onto the gold standard or increase the amount of gold backing, since gold has gone up to $1,700. Now, China doesn't want to do this because it wants to keep its currency weak, like the Japanese do with the yen. So the Chinese yuan needs to be kept low so that they can export to the United States. Now, as Stratfor Intelligence said, China may be a captive country to the United States, because if China's exports are not imported by the United States, there will be mass starvation and probably the imploding of China. But that situation does not give away Chinese power, because China has always been a coastal power, and the People's Republican Army, the People's Liberation Army of China, is probably going to re-establish control over its border territories because of its huge size and the political resources and ruthlessness of the Chinese government. Because this is a government that kills 1 million of its people every year through slave labour, torture, aborting, killing babies in starvation rooms, and they've been doing this for nearly 90 years. So, through the various nationalist and then communist regimes in China. So, there is a strong authoritarian and streak running through Chinese bureaucracy and government. China has been split up before, and yet it's reunified itself before. And it's threatening with the use of diesel submarines, and it's building carriers, Taiwan and Guam and the other neighbours in its area, which are all part of the American alliance system. Now, the Chinese do not rate the Europeans. They snubbed the Europeans before, although this will be to their cost, because Europe is a military and economic hyperpower. Is larger than the United States in both military and economic terms, and could use military Keynesianism to get its economy going through a military route, which I would use, but only on a moderate way of doing things. So maybe we should increase our defence spending to 4 to 7%, like the Americans do. But this brings into question American credibility and American ability to get through this crisis, because if the powers that be, I'll call them that, decide that they're not going to get their money from America, they're not going to get an extension on their power through America, then they'll choose someone else. They might choose China, they might choose Europe, they might even choose Russia as an outside bet. And if that happens, then America's power could evaporate. All empires end, as Niall Ferguson says, and when they disintegrate, as Carol Quigley said, that is the most violent time of an empire's dissolution. And the fact that America has to contend with rising powers in its own continental shelf in South America, and in Central America, in Mexico, and an unstable rise to power through Mexico is another point to take into cognition. But I believe that Europe will come out top dog out of all of this, because it has the most stable ability to deal with its debt. It's not overextended as America is in the Middle East. It's not in a quagmire as America is in the Middle East. You might say Libya, but I don't believe that's going to go on for much longer. Europe can pick and choose where it gets involved and where it doesn't, and it's been quite successful using limited forces, as it has in Southern Sudan and Darfur and Northern Sudan, and now in Libya, and possibly soon in Syria if we support the Arab Spring. There is also many technological steps forward that the United States and Europe can make together, and I hope that America and Europe do work together, and let's make this a European dominated century in the 21st century, with the United States and Europe working in partnership. As I said, the question of the ethnicity of who runs Europe and who runs the United States, being that they could possibly be Jewish people running the United States and Germans and English people running the EU, shouldn't be a factor. It should be a unifying thing, because we're both democratic, Europe is also developing its own credit agency